She tried to wipe the tears before he saw, but the rancher stepped closer, as if he'd been waiting for that exact moment. Rain slammed against the wooden walls as Gideon's hand closed around Naomi's wrist, stopping her just as she turned away. Her breath hitched, sharp in the cold air, the scent of wet leather and smoke clinging between them. He leaned in, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his voice before the words came, and then he said something that made her go still. "Tell me, would you have walked away too?" Rain came down hard over Red Canyon, turning the packed dirt road into thick, sucking mud. It hammered the wooden roofs, ran in crooked streams along the gutters, and soaked through anything left out too long. Naomi Brooks stood at the edge of the boarding house porch, her small wooden chest already in the mud below. The door behind her slammed. "You heard me," the owner muttered from inside. "I won't have trouble under my roof." A few figures lingered across the street beneath the overhang of the general store. No one stepped forward. A lantern flickered. Someone shifted their weight, then looked away. Naomi bent, lifted the chest with both hands. The wood was damp and rough against her palms. Her dress clung heavy to her legs. The rain had already found its way through her collar. She stepped off the porch. Mud pulled at her boots. The wind pushed at her back. She kept walking, past the livery, past the darkened church, out where the town lights faded and the road narrowed into a long stretch of open land, the kind that swallowed sound and left only the wind behind. She didn't stop until the shape of a ranch came into view. A single lantern burned near the front door. The fence posts leaned a little from weather and time. Beyond them, cattle shifted slow in the dark, their shapes barely more than shadows. Naomi set the chest down at the bottom of the steps. For a moment, she stood there, rain running down her face, mixing with something warmer she didn't bother to wipe away. Then she climbed. Her hand hovered once before knocking. When it did, the sound felt small against the storm. Footsteps came from inside. Slow, measured. The door opened. A man stood there, tall, shoulders filling the frame. His shirt sleeves were rolled, his hands rough and still. The lamplight caught in his eyes, gray and steady, taking her in from head to toe without a word. Neither of them spoke at first. Wind pushed rain between them. At last, he stepped back just enough to clear the doorway. "You can come in," he said, voice low, even. "Or freeze out there." Naomi hesitated only a second before stepping across the threshold. The warmth hit her first. Then the smell of wood smoke and coffee left too long on the stove. She stood just inside, unsure where to go, water pooling at her feet. The man closed the door behind her. The latch clicked into place. "You can set your things there," he said, nodding toward the wall. She didn't move right away. Her fingers tightened slightly around the handle of the chest before she let go. When she turned her face aside, it was quick. A small motion. Easy to miss. But not for him. He stepped closer. Not too close, just enough. His hand came up, rough fingers steady, and gently turned her chin back toward him. Naomi's breath caught. For a moment, she didn't look at him. Then she did. There was no question in his face, no pity either, only something quiet, something that didn't press. "You don't have to hide that here," he said. The words landed soft, but they stayed. Outside, the storm kept on. Inside, Naomi stood still, the rain still clinging to her, the weight of the road still in her bones. Yet something in her chest loosened, just enough to breathe. And for the first time that night, she didn't turn away. The man stepped back, giving her space as if it mattered. "There's a room," he said after a moment. "End of the hall. Door sticks a little." His voice carried no hurry. No questions. Naomi nodded once, Her fingers brushed damp hair from her cheek before she picked up her chest and followed the narrow hallway. The floor creaked under each step. A draft slipped through the walls, carrying the scent of sage and wet earth. The door did stick. She pressed harder, and it gave. Inside, the room was bare. A small iron bed, a folded quilt, a wooden chair by the window where rain tapped steady against the glass. No decorations, no signs of anyone staying long. Naomi set the chest down at the foot of the bed. She didn't sit, not right away. She stood there, listening. The house settled around her. A chair shifting somewhere in the front room. The faint scrape of boots on wood. Then quiet again. When she finally lay down, she kept her boots on. Sleep came slow. It always did in a new place. Morning slipped in pale and cold. Naomi woke before the sun cleared the ridge. Habit, more than rest. The kind you don't lose once it's learned. She sat up, listened again. No movement. She stepped out into the hallway. The air had cooled overnight. The fire in the main room had burned low, just embers now. She crossed into the kitchen without asking. A kettle sat near the stove. She lifted it, felt the lightness, and carried it outside. The yard was damp, the ground dark from rain. A trough stood near the side of the house. She filled the kettle, brought it back in, and set it on the stove. Wood cracked softly as she coaxed the fire back to life. By the time the first light reached the window, the smell of coffee had started to spread. She moved through the space quietly, wiped down the table, straightened a stack of tin plates, found a rag and cleaned where ash had fallen near the hearth. No one told her to. No one stopped her. He stood in the doorway longer than she noticed. Gideon Hale watched her without speaking. One hand rested against the frame. The other held his hat low at his side. She worked steady. No wasted motion. No hesitation over where things might be. Like she had done it before. Somewhere else. When she turned and saw him, she didn't startle. Just paused, then stepped back from the stove. "I wasn't sure what time you—" she began, then stopped herself. He moved inside, set his hat on the table. "You're up early." "I don't sleep late," she said. He nodded once, as if that answered enough. He poured himself coffee without asking. Took a sip. Let it sit. "It's good," he said. Naomi didn't answer. Just lowered her eyes for a second, then reached for the pan on the counter. They ate without much talk. The scrape of a fork, the low sound of wind outside, a board shifting somewhere in the walls. After, he stood and pulled on his coat. "There's work," he said. "If you're staying." She looked up at that. "Not quick, just enough." "I'll work," she said. He held her gaze a moment longer, then turned for the door. By mid-morning, Naomi had found her way to the back of the house. A stack of broken fence rails leaned against the barn. A bucket sat half-filled near the pump. Tools hung where they had been left. She picked one up, tested the weight, set it back. A horse shifted in the stall, watching her. She stepped closer, slow, hand out just enough for it to see. "It's all right," she murmured, voice low. The horse didn't pull away. In town, the sheriff leaned against the hitching post outside the general store. Cole Bennett watched Gideon approach, boots heavy with dried mud. "You took her in," Cole said. Gideon didn't answer right away, just tied off his reins. "She needed a place," he said. Cole let out a slow breath, shifted his weight. "You know who she is?" Gideon glanced at him once. "I know enough." The sheriff tipped his hat back, eyes narrowing. "Her husband didn't die quiet," he said. "Land dispute. Papers not settled. Folks talk. Folks always do." Cole studied him, then nodded once. "Just be sure you're not bringing more trouble than you need." Gideon mounted up without another word. By the time he returned, the sun sat high and hard above the ridge. Naomi was near the fence line, sleeves rolled, hands darkened with dirt. She had set 2 posts straight and was working the third into place, leaning her weight against it. A man from the next property stood nearby, watching. "Didn't think you'd bring in help like that," the man said, voice edged with something sharp. Naomi didn't look up. Gideon stepped down from the saddle. "Work gets done here," he said evenly. "Not talk." The man huffed once, then turned away. Naomi drove the post in with one final push. It held. She straightened, breathing a little heavier now. When she glanced toward Gideon, he was already walking back toward the house. He didn't look at her, but he didn't leave her standing alone either. And that was enough to keep her hands moving. The days settled into a rhythm that didn't ask questions. Morning came with pale light over the ridge. Naomi rose before it, same as before, moving through the kitchen with quiet hands. Coffee first, then bread, then whatever needed tending. Gideon was already outside most mornings. She could hear him before she saw him. Boots on packed dirt, the low murmur of cattle, a gate opening, then closing again. He never called for her. Still, she found her way out there. The barn smelled of hay and leather. A line of saddles hung along the wall, worn smooth from years of use. Tools rested where they'd last been set down. Nothing fancy, just kept. Naomi worked where there was space for her, filling buckets, brushing down a horse that stood patient under her hand. Mending a loose strap with thread she found in a small tin box near the door. No one told her how. She watched once, then did it. It happened on the 4th morning. The wind had picked up early, sharp and restless. One of the younger horses spooked when a loose board slammed against the side of the stall. Naomi stepped in too fast. The animal jerked hard, hooves scraping the dirt floor. The rope slipped from her hand. She lost her footing, went down on one knee. For a second, the world narrowed to sound. Wood cracking, breath rushing, the heavy shift of muscle too close. Then a hand closed around her arm. Strong, immediate. She was pulled up and back in one motion. Gideon stood between her and the horse, one hand steady on the reins, the other still holding her just long enough to make sure she was on her feet. "You don't step in like that," he said, voice low, not raised. "You wait till they settle." Naomi nodded once, catching her breath. "I thought I could—" "You don't think with horses," he cut in, not harsh. "Just certain. You read them." His hand slipped away, but not before she felt the warmth of it linger where his fingers had been. She brushed dirt from her skirt, more to steady herself than anything else. "I'll remember," she said. He studied her for a second, then gave a short nod and turned back to the stall. That was the end of it, but it wasn't. By midday, Naomi had begun to notice things she hadn't before. The land stretched farther than it looked from the road. Fences ran long and straight toward the hills. Cattle moved in numbers that didn't match a small operation. Men came and went, quiet but purposeful, each one tipping their hat to Gideon without hesitation. No one questioned him. No one gave orders over him. She stood near the water trough, watching as a wagon rolled through the gate. Supplies stacked high, flour sacks, barrels of feed, a crate marked with a shipping stamp from Santa Fe. More than a man living alone would need. One of the older hands, a man named Harris, caught her looking. "You're wondering," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Naomi didn't answer right away. "It's bigger than he says," she said finally. Harris let out a quiet breath through his nose. "Always has been," he replied. "He just don't see a need to say it." "Why not?" Harris shrugged. "Some folks come around when they smell money," he said. Some trouble does too. Naomi looked back toward the house. Gideon stood on the porch, hat low, watching the yard. Not overseeing. Just there. Like everything moved around him whether he spoke or not. That night, the sky turned fast. Clouds rolled in low and heavy, swallowing what little light remained. The wind shifted, carrying dust first, then the smell of rain. Naomi was still outside when it broke. Hard. Sudden. The first crack of thunder sent the cattle into motion, a restless wave pushing against the fence line. "Get the south gate!" someone shouted. Naomi didn't wait to be told. She ran. Mud grabbed at her boots again, same as the night she arrived. The gate had already started to give, one hinge loose from the earlier wind. She threw her weight against it. The wood shuddered under pressure. A steer slammed against the other side, sending a jolt up her arms. "Hold it!" Gideon's voice cut through the storm. He was there the next second, shoulder braced against the post, hands gripping the crossbar. Together they pushed. Rain soaked them through in moments. Her hair clung to her face. His shirt darkened, plastered against his frame. Another hit from the cattle. The gate buckled. Naomi slipped. For a split second, her footing gave way completely. Then his arm was around her waist, pulling her up, holding her steady, close enough that she could feel the heat of him even through the cold rain. "Stay with me," he said, breath rough near her ear. She didn't answer, just nodded. They held the line until the pressure eased, until the herd settled enough to move them back into place. When it was over, they didn't step apart right away. The storm still raged around them. Water ran down his face, his jaw set, eyes fixed on hers for longer than before. Not measuring, not distant. Something else. Something that stayed. Naomi's breath came slow, uneven. Her hands still rested against his chest where she had caught herself. Neither of them moved. Then, like it had been decided somewhere, neither of them spoke. He let her go. Turned back to the gate. The moment passed. But it didn't disappear. By morning, the storm had moved on, leaving the land rinsed clean and quiet. Water clung to the fence rails in thin lines. The air smelled of damp earth and something steadier underneath. Naomi worked slower that day, not because there was less to do, because something had shifted, and she didn't yet know where to place it. Gideon kept his distance. He spoke when needed, no more, no less. But once, near the well, when she struggled with the heavy bucket, he took the rope from her hand without a word, drew it up, set it beside her, and stepped away before she could thank him. That was how it was now. Small things, nothing spoken plain. The sound of wheels came just past noon, not the usual kind. This one rolled smoother, heavier, iron rims striking rock in a steady rhythm that didn't belong to a supply wagon. Naomi looked up from the yard. A carriage came through the main gate. Polished wood, clean lines, the kind that didn't travel far unless it had a reason. It stopped in front of the house. A man climbed down first, suit pressed, hat clean. He moved to open the door. Then she stepped out. Clara Whitmore. Her dress caught the light, pale blue against the dust. Gloves fitted tight at the wrist. Hair pinned careful, not a strand out of place. She didn't look at the ranch. She looked straight at Naomi. Recognition came fast. Not surprise, not confusion, something sharper. Naomi's hands went still at her sides. Clara crossed the yard without hesitation, skirts lifting just enough to keep from the mud. "Naomi," she said, voice soft, carrying easily in the open space. It had been years since anyone had said her name like that, like it belonged somewhere else. Naomi didn't move to meet her. Clara stopped a few steps away, eyes sweeping over her, boots, sleeves rolled, dirt on her hands. You've been busy, Clara said. Naomi held her gaze. What are you doing here? Clara's smile came slow. Practiced. I came to set things right. The man behind her stepped forward, holding out a folded document. Paper thick, official. Clara didn't take it. Not yet. You left quite suddenly, she went on, without settling what should have been settled. Naomi's fingers curled slightly. I left because there was nothing left to settle. Clara tilted her head, just a fraction. That's not what the records say. Word traveled faster than wind in a place like Red Canyon. By the time Gideon came from the far end of the property, 2 men had already drifted closer. Then another. No one spoke loud, but no one left either. Clara turned as Gideon approached. For a moment, she changed. The sharpness softened. Her shoulders lowered. Her voice dropped. Mr. Hale, she said, as if the name carried weight she respected. Gideon stopped a few feet from them. His eyes moved from Clara to Naomi, then back again. No hurry. Clara gestured lightly to the paper. I believe there's been a misunderstanding, she said, about who has rightful claim to certain property. Naomi didn't speak. Gideon didn't reach for the document. Go on, he said. Clara's fingers brushed the edge of the paper, but she kept her eyes on him. Naomi's husband, she said, did not leave things as simple as she's made them seem. There were debts, disputes, questions about how he died. A quiet stir moved through the men nearby. Naomi's jaw tightened, but she didn't interrupt. Clara took a small step closer. I've come with proper filings, she said. Signed. Witnessed. That land should never have passed to her alone. Gideon's expression didn't change. He looked at Naomi. She stood where she was, hands at her sides, shoulders straight, but still. Like she had learned long ago that speaking didn't always change what people chose to believe. Clara followed his gaze, then leaned slightly toward Naomi, close enough that only she could hear. You were never meant to stay anywhere, she whispered. The words landed quiet, but they cut clean. Naomi didn't answer. She looked past Clara, past the men, past the yard, toward the road. Then she turned. Not fast, not sudden, just enough to take a step away from the house, from the yard, from everything that had begun to feel like it might hold. Behind her, the murmur started to rise. Gideon didn't call her back. He didn't move to stop her. He only stood there, the paper still in Clara's hand, the weight of the moment settling in slow and heavy. And for the first time since she had stepped through his door, Naomi walked as if she already knew how it ended. The road into town felt longer than before. Dust clung to the hem of her dress, still damp from the storm the night before. The sky had cleared, but the air carried that strange stillness that comes after something has already broken. She didn't look back. By the time she reached the church at the center of Red Canyon, people had already gathered, not close together, just enough space between them to watch without being seen watching. The wooden doors stood open. Inside, the light fell soft through the narrow windows. Benches worn smooth by years of use. A table set near the front where papers lay waiting, edges weighed down by a small iron cross. Clara stood near it, gloved hands resting lightly on the surface, her posture calm, composed, like she had been expected. Naomi stepped inside. The sound of her boots on the wooden floor carried farther than she meant it to. A few heads turned. No one spoke. Clara didn't look surprised. You came, she said, her voice low, almost gentle. Naomi didn't answer. She moved down the aisle, slow, stopping a few steps away from the table. Her hands found the fabric of her skirt, fingers pressing into it just enough to steady herself. Clara picked up the papers. "These are the filings," she said, glancing toward the few men gathered along the walls. "Signed and witnessed. The land in question." The door opened behind them. The sound cut through the room clean. Footsteps followed, slow, measured. Naomi didn't turn. She knew the sound. Gideon Hale walked down the aisle without looking at anyone else. Dust marked his boots. His coat still carried the smell of the ranch. He stopped beside Naomi, not close enough to touch, but near enough that she felt the shift in the air. Clara smiled faintly. "I was hoping you'd come," she said. Gideon didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on Naomi. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Something passed between them. Not loud, not visible, but there. Clara cleared her throat softly, lifting the paper. "As I was saying, that land," Gideon said, voice steady. Now he looked at Clara. "It stays with her?" The room went still. Even the air seemed to hold. Clara's smile faltered, just for a second. "I don't believe you've seen the documents. I don't need to." His tone didn't rise. It didn't press. It simply settled, like weight on something already decided. Clara's fingers tightened around the paper. "This isn't about preference," she said. "It's about what's rightful." Gideon shifted slightly, one step closer to Naomi. "And so am I." The words fell quiet, but they landed harder than anything that had been said before. A murmur moved through the room. Low, uncertain. Naomi's breath caught, just once. She didn't look at him. Not yet. Clara stared, something sharp flashing through her composure. "You would stake your name on this?" she asked. Gideon didn't answer her. He turned, finally, just enough. "Naomi." Her name sounded different in his voice. Not formal, not distant. She looked at him then. His gaze didn't waver. No doubt, no hesitation. Just that same quiet certainty she had seen the night he opened his door. Naomi didn't speak. She didn't need to. She stood where she was, shoulders no longer drawn tight, hands no longer clenched. For the first time in that room, she didn't feel like she had to leave. Clara lowered the papers slowly. The fight didn't fall from her face all at once. It faded in pieces. The room no longer belonged to her. Without another word, she turned. The door opened again. Closed. The sound of it echoed once, then was gone. Outside, the wind had picked up again, soft this time, moving through the dry grass beyond the church. People drifted away in ones and twos. No one stopped Naomi. No one blocked her path. They simply moved aside. Later, back at the ranch, the sun sat low against the horizon. Naomi stood on the porch, looking out over the land that had once felt too wide to belong to anyone. Now it felt different, not smaller, just steady. Footsteps came behind her. Gideon stepped up beside her, resting his hand against the porch rail. Not touching her, not reaching, just there. "You stayed," he said after a while. She glanced at him. The light caught in his eyes, softer now than before. "That's all I ever needed." Naomi let the words settle. The wind moved through her hair, through the open land, through everything that had once felt uncertain. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. She simply stayed where she was. And this time, it wasn't because she had nowhere else to go. The wind moved slow across the land, carrying the quiet of something settled at last. Not perfect, not easy, just chosen. If you stood where Naomi stood that evening, you might feel it too. That moment when the past finally loosens its grip, when the voices that once told you to leave, to shrink, to disappear, fall silent. Not because they changed, but because you did. Maybe you've known a place that never felt like yours. Maybe you've learned to carry yourself small just to make it through the day. And maybe somewhere along the way, you stopped expecting anyone to see you clearly. But sometimes, it only takes one person who does. Not to fix you, not to save you, just to stand there, steady, and say, without raising their voice, that you belong. That kind of love doesn't arrive loud. It shows up in quiet choices, in staying, in not turning away when it would be easier to. If this story stayed with you, I'd like to hear where you're watching from, or what part of it felt closest to home. And if you find yourself drawn to stories like this, the kind that carry a little dust, a little silence, and a lot of heart, you're welcome to stay a while longer. There are more waiting just up the road.